Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Stu and the Nun. Episode looks like 353, according to Rob, the unpaid producer. And thank you for joining us tonight or tuning in to watch us after the fact, if that's the case. Toby may be joining me soon. We're waiting on to hear from the Nun himself to see if he'll be able to jump on. But until then, we have our guest on tonight in this episode, Mr. Chris Ekstrom, who is very astute in the world of politics and very involved with a lot of things political, and quite a history in that aspect. And so, and very glad to have him on tonight. Chris, thank you so much for joining us, man. Appreciate you coming on the show.
Sure, my pleasure. My pleasure to be here.
Yeah. So, this is a show about, first responders, military, foreign policy, domestic policy, and politics in general, just all those things. And so, obviously this is a big piece of it. We're going to talk about kind of what you just got, what you just joined and what you did there. But before we get going, like you just maybe give our listeners and viewers a little bit of a background of some things that you've done and kind of what brought you here.
Well, I've lived kind of all around the country. I was born in Columbia, Missouri, and raised in Kansas City. Then we went to Dallas, but I always think of Kansas City as being where I came from, and my home in Missouri in general. Was in Dallas for a lot of high school. Went on to New York and was in New York City about 25 years. Um, did a lot of business and lived in Memphis, Tennessee, and now am currently in Florida. So I've lived a lot of other places I won't bore you with, but I've certainly traveled and lived quite a bit different places in the United States. I worked. We had a company called Cablecom, which was a electron dealing with digital upgrades essentially to the existing cable system and telephone systems. We put a lot of fiber optic cable all over the United States and upgraded a lot of equipment all over the United States using digital equipment. So I feel kind of like, in retrospect, that I helped bring the ability to do what we're doing right now to people, all throughout. And I think it's been a crucial thing for people on the right and conservatives that they have been able to communicate this way. And for anybody, but certainly for us, it was, the newspapers were certainly, or the media, the big media was certainly not favorable towards us or even allowing us to express our views. So that's something I feel good about having done a lot of. And so I've gone on to run for Congress in Texas's 13th district. The guy who won is a friend of mine, Ronnie Jackson. I endorsed him and helped him, and he's been, I think, a very good congressman, and I'm glad he prevailed. He and I both sort of had agreed that if one of us came in second in the run, and it's a runoff state, and we were playing for a runoff, that we would support the other. And we were up against a rhino to the core guy who would have been worse than the existing rhino, and so I was just glad that we prevented that. And I'm now currently on the board of U.S. Term Limits. I served as the Texas chairman of U.S. Term Limits after my campaign, and am the chairman of my own super PAC since about 2015, called Courageous Conservatives PAC. We also had a C4 that was called Conservative Response Team. And so I have been active in politics. I was active as a donor, somewhat active I was an activist of some sort. I didn't, when I first got very involved, I didn't expect that I would be this involved or continue to be this involved. And I never intended to run for office. That's for sure. But I felt drawn to it. I started to realize that people might underestimate what they can bring to politics, because sometimes we assume that there are people out there doing some of the things that at a higher level than we could or would, and that's not necessarily at all true in politics.
Right.
We could use as many amateurs who want to get involved as citizens as possible, as far as I'm concerned. So I can't really think of
Uh,
anything else. That
the
sort of sums it up.
Yeah, the first ones we had were all amateurs, right?
Right.
So
Gifted amateurs for sure.
yeah, so I thought when they said 13th, and I was reading, I was like, why did that sound familiar? Like, oh, we may have contributed to your losing that 13th district. Ronnie Jackson's a friend of the show. We have had
Oh,
him a couple times, and when he was running, very close to one of our good friends, Taco Mitchell Taco Bell, who has another show, long term friend of mine, Marine aviator, and him and Ronnie were real good friends, and we've had them on. But yeah, great district. Yeah, I mean, probably either one of you been great. But if you had to lose someone, that's a good one to lose to, I think.
yeah. If I had known Ronnie better, I wouldn't have even run. But but at that time, I really didn't, and so we learned about each other. We had a short runway because Thornberry, who had been the representative Thornberry, uh, he kind of got out late, and so we had from basically November until 1st of November. Or was that right? Was it? Yeah, about the 1st of November until middle March. And that's a very short period of time. So, but I
Right.
did get to know Ronnie, and he is a great guy, and he served also as a Marine combat doctor
Yeah.
very honorably, and he's he's a person I admire personally. So could do a lot worse, couldn't you?
Yeah. So yeah, so you've been very involved. You've also, I mean, helped on other things, and before we get into the term limits, which is definitely, as we were talking before that went on air, something near and dear to our heart, to my heart too. As you've seen, I just kind of as you've seen the previous 4 years play out, and how this election cycle played out also with everything. Was there anything? In either one, and how Biden stayed in office and what happened there, or with the latest election, that just, I'm just curious, it surprised you that you didn't see coming? Did you think maybe it was going to be? I had friends of mine that were super conservative that thought for sure the Democrats were going to find another way to cheat, and there's no way Trump would get in because they had something up their sleeve, and even though they wanted that not to be the case, but uh, anything that surprised you through that whole campaign season?
Well, I'll be honest with you. I've been surprised 3 times in a row. I was surprised in 2016 when Donald Trump won, and I'll never forget staying up all night, pulling out the bottles of champagne, literally, and really just enjoying it, and watching that unbroken glass ceiling up in New York and Javits Center. That was beautiful, and I just enjoyed the hell out of that. And then 2020, I thought Trump would win. I mean, I contributed pretty heavily to Trump. I ran in obviously in that race for Congress, and I just couldn't imagine the American people were going to elect Joe Biden, who seemed to be a shell of a man at that time. Uh, I will say this, and I said it at the time, and I believe it's more, and even I would even go further, I suppose now, but I believe that Donald Trump got more than 75 million votes. I have no earthly idea how many real votes Joe Biden got. And what I think we have to put in context there was the COVID situation provided the absolutely great cover for a massive steal of that election if it were to happen, and if it did indeed happen. And the Democrats are a real political party. The Republican Party is not really a political party as it should be. Unfortunately, it is often a debating club and a gentleman's club and I don't know an identity and a team red. A lot of our people don't vote in primaries. As far as I'm concerned, if and I intentionally, be a little tough with it, but if you don't vote in the primary, you're not a Republican, you're not a conservative, you're pretty much a nothing who is basically just going out there blindly voting for a magic R. And let me tell you something, there ain't nothing magic about that R. We've got a lot of terrible elected Republicans who ought to be kicked to the curb. I don't spend a lot of time worrying about Democrats. I know what they are. Uh, but I do spend a lot of time fighting rhinos and phonies and people that really have done more damage to the country than the Democrats, frankly, in my opinion. they have enabled the Democrats frequently.
Well, or when you know where the enemy is and you know what the enemy's capable of, they're willing to do, they're a known factor, right? They're constant. That's fine. You know,
Yes.
they're on, to use a couple of different analogies, they're outside the wire or they're outside the firewall, however you want to use it. You know where they are. That's what you got to be focused on. But it's the ones that are behind the firewall or inside the compound with you that always pose the greatest threat because they come with a degree of trust of or non, are just not keeping an eye on them, thinking there's an inherited level of trust, and they are the ones that can sabotage you faster than anything else, right? And you talked about it great, right? The Republicans, just because they have an R does not mean, if they have an R, some of them could have the real big R, which is the Rhino R, and that kind of thing. It's interesting you said that. I've given the same credit to the Democrats, where I've said, I mean, look at what Nancy Pelosi ran. I mean, she ran a tight ship. When she said don't do it, nobody did it, right?
Right.
The other night, Hakeem Jeffries told, apparently what they said is he told all the Republicans or all the Democrats not to bring any props, not to do anything, just sit there, listen and quiet and all that kind of stuff. Obviously, a number of them blew him off, starting with Al Green and the others. So he doesn't run by fear, command, or anything like Nancy Pelosi did. They knew she could ruin them, and she had the will. She was willing to do it, and they marched in line with her. And it's not just her; the Democrats in general. Barack Obama said something. He said jump. They just said how high.
Right. That's right.
That's been a complaint of mine. I don't know what your observation is, but my observation from back in 2008 on was that's when we lost our three branches of government. Right. The concept of the congressional, or, the executive branch being kept in check by Congress, went out the window because, and sadly, even when the Republicans were in charge of, the houses, the different upper and lower house, they still, whatever Obama wanted, Obama got, and there was no one keeping him. They were just scared to death to even question him on anything. They definitely have a loyalty like nobody else.
Yeah, that was going back to that time. I was very active at that time. I was doing a lot of things with sorry, pardon me, with turn this off. I was doing a lot of things with Senate Conservative Fund, which was primarying senators, and the idea was we were going to kick out these really bad rhino senators, and we were going to start to take control of the Senate and sort of prevent in the Senate at least some of the things you're describing. And did that work? To some degree, it worked, but it's still an evolving process. But we had no leader to get behind in a distinct way. And people can say, that there's a lot of libertarians that are hostile towards even the word leader or the concept. I think, for example, and I've come over the years. I had been very sympathetic to libertarianism when I was younger, in a more formulaic, theoretical way. But as you get older, you realize more and more that there are people that are able to be courageous and be brave and be well-intentioned at the same time. They're rare, it seems, in politics at least. I don't think they're rare in real life. And when you find one of those people, you better fall behind and do what you can, to be whatever you can be, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 10,000, because that is so rare, and we lacked it so obviously, and we couldn't do a damn thing with Obama, and it was ridiculous. It was pathetic. I mean, if you watching that debate between Obama and Romney, the first one, and then to go from that to Romney losing the way he didn't win a single swing state. I mean, you could say, look, Romney was a terrible candidate.
Yeah,
and he was.
Desperate party with up there. I mean, he wasn't a good candidate from the get-go. He never really was.
No. And John McCain, frankly, there may be veterans here who have other opinions. I think John McCain, I think it's a disgrace that he's buried in Annapolis. There is no way on God's green earth that I would have ever authorized his burial on the grounds of Annapolis. I think he's one of the worst we ever produced. And with regard to him being the candidate in 2008, even a conservative like me and many of us were kind of sitting here thinking, if he hadn't put Palin on the ticket, I'm not sure how motivated I would have been not to vote for the Constitution Party at that point. So
Yeah.
It's bad. It's bad. The past is bad for us.
Well,
It's hard to overestimate that.
yeah, we had an identity crisis for those years. And just like a sports team, we'll have good, the Patriots will be the best in winning Super Bowl after Super Bowl. And then, things change and they're the bottom of the heap. Right. So, for we were at the Republican Party was at its low point during those years because those two were the best we could get because there was no one else that, assuming was in the best spot, could garner the attention, was ready at that time. And that's the best we had to offer. So, yeah, there's no doubt that we lost. But how quickly things flipped in 2016, right? When and 20 and really in 2020 and then even in those 2 years where even though Trump initially went up against 16 other people, he cleaned house and then we saw the Democrats have a ton of people, couldn't do anything. In 2020 had a lot of people, but then what cleaned them out was the DNC decided who they wanted, right? They picked them, but then it became was okay. At that time, the Democratic Party was the party of, we don't want old white guys, for lack of a better term, and we want all this diversity. But all they kept picking were, the Bernies and the Bidens and the Hillarys. But luckily, the people hated Hillary more than anything else, and they couldn't put the others up there. And it was supposed to be the party of openness and all this kind of stuff, and yet they could serve up nobody. And now they look like they are complete disarray. They're where the Republican Party was in 2004 to 2015.
Well, I think that you said a lot there, and I mean the factors that in 16 seem to have been dominant was A, people just couldn't stand Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
B, Trump was a kind of able to take advantage of the ongoing dissatisfaction among Republicans and very conservative Republicans, particularly with the status quo. I mean, look, I've got Reagan behind me tonight just as a reason. I volunteered for Jack Kemp in 1988 and carried boxes around and did whatever they told me. That Jack Kemp, and then you got straight into George H.W. Bush. And frankly, I want to go back to 1988. I mean, I think everything went to hell from 1988 on as far as presidential politics. The Bushes were a disaster, maybe the worst for us. I was just a pure train wreck from after Reagan. And the Bushes, by the way, intentionally destroyed Reaganism. There's no ambiguity there. They lied and lied and lied and lied. And George W. Bush did a real good job lying. And got a chance, and they hated Reagan and Reaganism, and they got rid of every single Reaganite that they could all along the way. So that wasn't an accident,
Well, I think talked about it here on this show and other shows a number of times, and I used to say that in 2004 or 2008 and 2012, I mean that the American people, the politicians, DC was not listening to the American people, but honestly, I think it can go back based on what you kind of thought about. It can go back to 92, right? Ross Perot took a big chunk of votes and definitely impacted that election. And I think that was like the precursor, in my opinion. And I'm not nearly educated enough politics enough, but when I look back, the precursor that the American people were saying, we want someone different. Mm-hmm. And then I go forward to 2008 and hope and change, and they went with that. And this young guy out of Chicago who talked well at the DNC convention, and they went with him, hoping somebody would be different, even though he was in politics. He was a little, he really wasn't in that long. And then 2012 came, and he got in again, and he kind of lived on, give me some more time. But when 2016 came, I think that was the first time, and maybe but I think it was the first time that a primaries, especially on the DNC, went all the way to DC. Like it went to the District of Columbia before that was decided. Like Bernie would have won it. And now Bernie's an old white guy and a long-term politician, but like Barack, seemed like he was kind of outside of the Beltway, and the country was willing to give him a chance because he wasn't the they saw Hillary. She was just an extension already of Bill. And lifelong politics. And that was the American people giving a shot across the bow. I think when Bernie almost took it, if the DNC hadn't stepped in, and Trump getting it, of them saying we're sick and tired, bring us somebody new. I think it started in 92. I think it showed itself again in 08. But I don't think the politicians of DC saw that's what the American people were telling them. I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
Well, I'll tell you, I think you're right to begin the whole story with 92, showing and proving with Ross Perot that the people in general, writ large, were totally dissatisfied with the way things had gone. And I think it's fair to say since Reagan wasn't perfect. There was a lot of issues there for the right and for anybody else. But the Ross Perot episode showed that somebody could, and if they had resources, and I think you have to put that caveat because Perot was able to do that, could influence people even over the heads of the mass media, and they were willing to listen and perhaps to vote them in. And then when you get to 2016, from there, which there had been a lot of undercurrent of things, the Tea Party had happened before it, and I think the Tea Party movement was really important because it got people back to the understanding that this is a constitutional republic. Now, the Tea Party is a faction, and I'm a member of a faction. I'm an unapologetic, hardcore right winger. I don't even just say conservative anymore. You can call me conservative and right wing. I really couldn't care less. If they call me hard right, great. So the thing is, my faction, we knew where we wanted to go, and it was basically anywhere but where the Bushes had gone and Romney and McCain. So we were, always pushing the envelope as far as the Overton window open, and the people at the same time in the larger writ large, they were looking for other alternatives. So 16, we all looked at it. I was with Cruz, and I started my PAC in order to support Ted Cruz. And I was in Iowa, and we played I think one of the proudest things I've done in political from a practical term was the work we did in Iowa on behalf of Cruz. And I think, I will point blank claim, even though we were a minnow pack compared to some of the bigger ones, we had very, very tough messaging and very direct messaging. We attacked the governor of Iowa when he did what he did. And bottom line is Trump expected to win in Iowa. Don't ever let anybody tell you that Trump did not expect to win. He was not happy. And I don't think, in retrospect, frankly, that Senator Cruz fully expected to win, which showed later, frankly, in the campaign. And Trump really was able to refocus himself and get going in South Carolina. But if I look at Iowa, and you were talking about Bernie Sanders, there were people in Iowa approaching their caucus leaders, and Iowa has kind of a unique system where people can talk on the behalf of a candidate, and they all try to influence each other before they caucus and put their vote in. There were people coming to the precinct chairs for Cruz and saying, I'm not sure if it's Bernie Sanders or Ted Cruz for me. And these guys who are the Ted Cruz guys were like, what the hell do I say to that? I mean, well, they're polar opposites, we hope. But that shows you there was a ferment of people who were not looking for whatever the narrative had been up until then. And Donald Trump, as it turns out, was the right man at the right moment. And really, in some ways, incredibly oddly, the perfect candidate. And I'll throw this in as an anecdote. I got to know a lot of the big donors, and I got to know a lot of national activists, that identified as conservative. And by 2018, Steve Bannon came through Dallas, and he asked me to come to a presentation he was making of a film he made that year, if you recall, about how we need to hold on to the house and everything. And there was about 200 people in this movie theater, and big donors who had given a lot of money to a lot of Republicans, Cruz in particular. I asked this question, and I made a comment at the end of it, and by 2017, I basically had concluded that the right guy won. Okay, I basically concluded that Trump really was the right man, and that because of his ability to fight and the fact that he was pursuing a pretty conservative to the right course. And I said out loud, I think the right candidate won. I didn't say the best man or any of that. I get into that. It was just the right candidate for the right time and place. And there was an audible sigh, as if I had said something right, really like debatable and questionable. Like, oh my God, how could he say that? He was such a big cruise guy and all this. And I never heard an audible sigh like that in in an actual reality. And I just thought, man, these people are not reconciled to what's going on here. That's good, and that's not good. What the heck are they thinking?
Because
And
that's
I don't think Cruz would have got as far as Trump did in 2016 to 18. I'll be honest with you, I really don't.
yeah, that shows that they're not aligning the people with the party and the choice, right? It's you
I
know,
think it does. I don't care who it is, as long as we're going in the direction of restoring, frankly, first thing, reckoning with the enemies and domestic enemies often of the American Constitution and the American Republic, and then restoring it to the best of our ability, both the Constitution and the Republic and the country that we live in. That's what I'm in here for. I'm not here because that I have any personal, affection for Napoleon or something. It's not anything like that. This is about restoring those two things. So when I see it happening, and we see it happening now, and what this guy has done, this president has done in the last 46 or 7 days or whatever it is, I'm thrilled. Absolutely did not expect this much, and I am absolutely thrilled. So it's nothing's perfect, but if somebody is defining themselves or saying that they're to the right and they're conservative and they're picking apart everything that's going on right now, well, hell, they're never going to be satisfied. Those are the people to ignore. Those are people who need to get with a program, frankly.
yeah, it's funny. Oh, that's come over the last. I mean, were you at the inauguration? Were
I
you?
didn't go this time. I went in 16. I did
Yeah,
not go up this time. I had a lot of friends who were there, and it was a pretty good party. So I'm sorry I missed it.
yeah. I was at. This was my fourth one. I was at both of Bush's W's, and I was at the 16 one. This was one definitely different, and especially from 16. You remember 16. It was. I used to tell everyone on the 20th it was all red hats, and the 21st it was all pink hats. Right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it was a bit of a cluster in 16 because I think there was some deep state activity there to make things
Oh,
difficult.
yeah.
I've
No,
never won. Sorry.
and like I say the day after, I mean, it was riot downtown. I mean, it was just like you had to
Yeah,
hide your red hat. I mean, it was you
yeah.
could get pwned by a bunch of angry Karens or something, and
A fate
but
worse than death.
yeah, exactly. I was there for a few days after, several days after. This 3-4 days later, you getting into the Pentagon City Mall, you going to up an elevator, whatever, and it was. Were you there? I was there. Wasn't it awesome? I mean, this is 3 days after. These are people that were just staying, high fiving. I went to Reagan after. I flew out on Wednesday or Thursday, whatever it was.
Yeah.
Like airport, everyone's walking around with their MAGA hat. It was just a completely different crowd. It was like, and that's why I was calling early on. I was saying I knew he was going to get it because you could just see it and hear it across, not what the talking heads were saying, but just in the everyday conversations you were having. It was like, this country's on fire for this. This is not just I'll go vote because there's nothing else to do. These people wanted him in that office. It was
Well,
very
I was
apparent.
going to say earlier when we were talking about the whole three. I in 24, I'll admit, I just really felt like I don't know what's going to happen because I was so disappointed in 20, and then I believe obviously there was a lot of malfeasance that went on there, and so in 24 I just did everything I could. What I mainly did in 24 that I'm proud of is I'm a Catholic and I worked on Catholics in swing states and particularly Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan. And I focused on that and tried to get them out, turn them out, and influence them, and some of them to change from what they had done in the past. And I know that my pollster for my race up there is a guy named John McLaughlin, and he's one of Donald Trump's top 3 or 4 pollsters. And I would call John up and say, of course, we couldn't talk about anything that were facts of the case because he can't talk about that. But I'd just say things like, John, how close do you think this thing could be? I mean, do you think 1,000 votes in Pennsylvania or in Michigan or Wisconsin could make the difference? And he would say, we're assuming 100 votes could make the difference. And I think that was a big change, by the way, from 20, in that the absolute, it's always good in politics. If anybody listening to this takes away anything about politics, if you run for office, don't measure those damn curtains. Don't take anything for granted. Never, never. I had people telling me, oh, don't worry about Ronnie Jackson. He didn't have enough money. He's not going to be able to get the message out, blah, 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 blah. Meanwhile, the hairs on the back of my neck were starting to stand up about 2 weeks out. And then Ronnie got endorsed by President Trump about 9 days out. So, you can't take anything for granted. Never. I don't care how good it looks.
Hey, man, Buffalo Bills fan. We lost a game in 13 seconds when everyone thought we had it summed up. We lose a hockey game by a puck going wide right, and a football game by a ball going wide right on a field goal. So, nothing guaranteed until that final whistle blows. And
no.
I think,
well, I'm a Chiefs fan. I'll confess, and a long time one. Royals, Chiefs.
I heard the KC part. I wasn't going to go there, but
yeah. Well, look, after that whipping we got by the Eagles, I don't think anybody should be so angry about the Chiefs anymore. I don't think they could be. That was pretty bad.
I don't know if they whipped that bad. I don't know what happened to KC, but man, I wish they would have done that 2 weeks earlier. But they just collapsed. I don't know what happened, but So it you're right. It shouldn't. They should. And I think Trump learned the first time that, look, there's definitely some things happen. There's no way Biden got 81 million. There's no way he got more votes than Barack Obama did.
I don't believe that. I agree. No way.
In votes, and there's been enough stuff that there's enough smoke there that there's a fire somewhere underneath. And I think Trump went in and his campaign team and all his advisors, and I think he's even admitted it. He came in we've seen it over the last 6-7 weeks. He came in a lot smarter. I think the first time he had to beat the Republican Party, the Democratic Party, and the media. And honestly, like you said, I think what caused him to win was there was more despise of Hillary than there was worry about Trump. And a lot of them were couch voters, i.e. they never left the couch, right? I think that's why he won when he won in 16. And I think after 20, he realized, okay, I have to be good enough to win and that much more to overcome anything they can throw at it. Right. Yeah. Every shady thing. But like I said, they didn't have COVID. They didn't have the mail-in votes. They didn't have all that mess. They didn't have harvesting and people picking people up and driving them there and all that kind of stuff. I think the one thing we talked about, the Democrats are good at staying together, but they also took that 4 years from 16 to 20. And they got the Karl Roves on their world too, that zero in on counties, and they didn't go after the big. They know they got the big cities. They know the ones they got in the bank. They went after the smallest municipalities they could that would do it just enough to flip a state. Right? They went for tier 2, tier 3 cities, not the big. They were in the bank, and I think that's where they were tactically smart to in 20, even if they were doing other shady stuff. They knew.
I agree with that. I agree with that. They did the right thing in 20. I think, look, Biden was a longtime political operator who had a really strong team in the sense that, like you say, they stick together. He is loyal to these people. I mean, they may be the most. I say terrible things about them all the time. You can read some of them on Facebook and really pretty bad stuff about them. But look, the bottom line is they stuck together and they did a lot of things right. Like you're saying, I do believe there was malfeasance. I'll never concede that was a clean election by any means. But in 24, we made it so that would be difficult to do, much more difficult to do. And we took nothing for granted, down to 100 votes. I mean, I pursued small groups of people who don't turn out, and Latin Rite mass Catholics like me, which are a minority of a minority of a minority, and we didn't take it for granted, So,
Yeah.
you have one opportunity when it comes to these big elections to, speak to the whole, well, not the whole country, but the debates, right? And a lot of people don't pay any attention to it, and often debates don't make a lot of difference in say a Senate race, even. Okay, certainly not congressional races usually,
Right.
but in this one we saw a candidate melt down. We saw Biden literally expire on stage, his political career, and then they replaced him swiftly. I think they did the best they could. They're very proud of their campaign, by the way. They legitimately believe that they ran just an incredible campaign with Kamala Harris. It might be true that the campaign they ran was better than the candidate. I mean, she was so awful and pitiful and pathetic.
Run a campaign and not run a good I mean, you could have all the commercials you want in the world, and you can put the coolest, backdrops to it, whatever. But I mean, if your candidate just is despised and a really laughing stock from the get go, I don't know how you can only put so much lipstick on that pig.
Well, I would say Hillary was despised, and even worse, Kamala was held in contempt. And when people hold you in contempt, uh, that's a whole nother bad thing. I mean, they just think like this person is not equipped. Why are they there? And we know why she was there, because the other guy melted down so badly. So she
So
wasn't there for any because they chose her.
So let me. Some things I've heard, and not with any reputable, just some things I've heard. I put together seem to make sense. That when he was, I believe, sabotage. Well, I don't know which one of his people told him it was a good idea to debate that early in June. I think they did it knowing damn well what was going to happen. I think they saw the writing on the wall, and but when that happened, and he went up there, and then collapsed, imploded, if you would, and then he had to all the people come out, and Hollywood come out, and then apparently Pelosi and Schumer came out against him, and kind of told him to step aside, in which he did, and then the pressure was intense. I mean, I think on the right, we were like, no, keep him in, please, as
Yeah.
long.
No, we didn't want to lose him actually at
Right.
that point. That's for sure.
So when he stepped down, and he didn't endorse her right away for a few hours, and then he did. Some of the stuff I heard was that he knew that she was less like. I mean, here's what I would say: he did with Kamala what Obama did with him. Obama picked him because he knew there's no one would ever take him out, because they did not want Biden in there. Right? That he was an insurance policy. Biden picked her because she was the first one booted, and she was so unliked by folks that he knew there's no way. Look, if he would have had anyone competent in there, halfway competent, they would have 25th him 2 years in, right? But she was literally that bad where they go, no, we'll keep Joe. We can keep pulling the strings.
Yeah.
But in that
I think that's a fair assessment, probably. I don't, obviously I don't know, but
right,
I think that's a good assessment of the situation they were in. And I do think what's incredible that we seem to have learned by these last couple of presidential elections, we've learned, I think, two things. One, that there's an incredible disloyal anti-American faction or factor. I don't know if I call them a faction. The deep state people, you could call it on one level, and there's multiple names. It runs through both the Republican and the Democratic Party is controlled by it. Uh, they wouldn't get behind Trump to make him a success as our president in 16, and that is something I don't think we've ever seen before. Reagan certainly did, I think, get a buy-in from others in 80 and 84. We didn't get it. We expected it. Frankly, I expected it that they would essentially, kind of have more respect for the country, but they don't have it. We saw it this last speech that Trump just made. I mean, that is a disloyal opposition. I pray to God that our rhinos flee the Republican Party as it stands today, the Trump Republican Party, and go over into the Democrats and make sense of that. Because as much as I really don't like the rhinos and I hate their disingenuousness, I wouldn't feel that way if they went and became Democrats and they transformed the Democratic Party into a something other than the nut ward it is now. I literally have no respect for the federal Democratic Party, and I wouldn't shake the hands of just about anybody that was over there. The last couple nights ago, they were an absolute, utter, and total disgrace in every way. And I think the American people saw it. If you saw, there was a poll, 79% or something in a CBS or CNN poll said they approved of the president's speech. President's speech was very polarizing and very tough. I loved it, of course.
Yeah.
But listen, for that number to come out, that means the people despise the Democrats, and they richly deserve that.
Especially a poll from CB, I think it was CBS, right? Who's going to ask the people they want to ask to get the results they want, right?
I assume, right?
Two that did, right? Kinzinger and Cheney are two rhinos that went over to the other side. I think it's safe to say that's what they've done. And again, like we talked about at the start, if I'd rather have if I know they're going to be the enemy, let me throw them outside the wire. At least I can watch them out there, protect against them, than have them sneaking behind me and stabbing me in the back. But
yeah, and let's face it, Kinzinger and Cheney, as much as we see them, I mean, look, if they were in the, I didn't serve, but if I were in a trench with them, I'd like to think I'd just have to, they'd have to go right away. Yeah, I'm not going to stand there and get shot in the back. So, right. But if they're over on the other side and doing whatever it is they want to do, they might actually look more normal than the people who were up there the other night, who all look like collectively. I'm not kidding. That looked like a nut house of people who had escaped from the nut house. Right. I mean, it's a pathetic bunch of people. Well, I can't imagine anyone wanting to be associated with that.
Yeah, they've been amping up every time, right? The previous ones, they would all dress in, all do this and everything like that. But one thing was highlighted after was when the president's guests come there, they all have there's someone that has done something, right? They're not just, they didn't grab someone off the street at the bus stop. They're somebody that has fought cancer, lost a child, did this, whatever. Like it doesn't matter if you're left, right, or whatever, center. It's usually a story, or they're representative of a situation or story that would pretty much demand applause from anybody, or recognition or thanks or whatever it may be, right?
Right.
And again, I mean, I think they really showed their true colors, besides what Al Green did. And everyone looks at him and goes, that's that dude. He's, he's like Maxine. He's like the rest of them. There's just nothing you can do. But when you have a 13-year-old boy to survive, go through all these brain surgeries and all that kind of stuff, and you clap for him, right? Or you have a mom who's being recognized and because her daughter is just been murdered by, regardless how she got murdered, right? Or a young man who gets told right then he's going to West Point. He's got a 4.4 GPA. It doesn't matter the guy standing up their podium talking. You would still clap. You don't have to stand, but you would still clap and show you're still an American. You're still a human being.
One of the notable moments, and there were so many low points that it's hard to say what is the lowest point for the Democrats, but when the Hamas hostages were recognized, and they kind of came a little later in the whole, display of the people that were there. They shot Adam Schiff, the new senator from California, and they showed him, and he had this grimace on his face, and he's looking at his phone, and I'm thinking, how in the hell would somebody react to that, especially Adam Schiff and his background? I just couldn't believe it. I had to say something out loud. I was in a public place, but I said something I'm not going to repeat here, but it involved a couple of expletives. I mean, to me, it just was surreal. I couldn't believe that was how he was reacting. This is crazy. I mean, it went into a new level of crazy that I don't think any of us have ever seen before. And when people are saying on TV, Fox and stuff, and they're saying this may be like a Waterloo moment of sorts for them, I can't say I can rule that out, because I'll tell you what, I think they may have killed themselves in 26 for taking back the House. I have never felt more confident that we are going to buck the trend of midterm elections, and we're going to have a bigger majority in the House, and we're going to add even maybe some senators over there, because if this is where they're headed, I'll tell you what, they got a hell of a hard time to correct what's going on right now.
Well, you said you were surprised what Schiff did, but he did that. Pocahontas. But man, they had a good example setter. That's what happens when you have a president look at their watch when their bodies of American soldiers are being rolled off right in front of them. So, in all honesty, the precedent had been set, right? That's just like, what do I have to do to get out of here? How much longer do I got? I mean, I when I saw that, that's what I made. That's the first thing I thought of was how
Can I
much.
ask you a question? Since you have a very strong following of people that serve, combat people and first responders, do you think that there was a significant number of people that believed General Kelly when he claimed that Trump said to him over at Normandy, "Oh, these were suckers who got killed," or some idiotic claim like that? Do you think that there was a significant number of anybody who believed that? And that was General Kelly,
Right.
who, I mean, the man is supposedly a standout Marine, and I I just can't believe
I,
you can't think of lying usually of those people. But what did people say to you about that?
I don't think many did. I didn't have many even bat an eye about it because completely skewed. I mean, we had 51 intelligence professionals who are true
Yeah, yeah,
seasoned clandestine operations sign on to something and then later say, well, it's because so and so came to me and asked me to do it, and I did that kind of stuff. And it just goes, wow, you will throw out years and years of professionalism and all that just for a party line. I think people known enough. If it had been said the first in 2016, where people didn't know President Trump, maybe some people would have given some credence, but they've seen enough, and there's been enough stories, especially running through the military circles, of how he is respected and talked to military members, and you get families saying that are never broadcasted or shown on video that he came in and see him, and he kept it all on the down low, and he came in behind the cameras. Enough of that has circled around, and people are like, yeah, that's not his style. He would
I
not. I
was
don't.
told right after the 16 election by some people that I truly respect. These are mainly Vietnam veterans who were fairly high-ranking officers at that time, and very active in operations and combat. And they told me that Donald Trump had given a lot of support to people, individuals, quietly, with never asking for any recognition over the years. They said easily since the 80s, and that they were impressed by him. And so of course, I always listened to that.
Yeah.
But I mean, some of these things were so egregious and horrible. General Mattis, he's a disgrace. Obviously, General Milley is a disgrace, and I hope that they pursue him as far as they possibly can. I don't know that there's anything else they can do with him, but I would pray to God that if they can, they will. He's a terrible example. I mean, I think they need to start making examples of these generals. We have a real problem there because we've got way too many of them,
Yeah.
and they're political, and they really seem to. I mean, they're just disgracing the uniform, sadly, and I have a deep respect for it. I
But
really hope.
they're all politicians, right? Spending 22 years in the military myself, born into it, raising a son in it. They are, and a lot of friends that are general officers and were, right. When you get to that level, you are a politician, right? They are 100% politician. This is why some have said, not since George Washington is Donald Trump the first person ever to become president that didn't come from politics. Even Dwight D. Eisenhower was considered, even though he came from being a general, he was a 4-star general, and you're kind of a politician. And I said this a lot in 2016 and on, that really, since George Washington, has a person become president that did not grow up in the world, because every other president grew up in the world of politics, right? We always tell little Johnny, little Susie, yeah, you can grow up. The reality is there's an asterisk on that, and it's if you become an intern and a lobbyist and get elected and become this and do this,
Right,
maybe, right? So, but even like say Eisenhower, some people will give him a pass, but others were like, well, he was a 4-star general, he kind of was there. But these generals are politicians. They worry about what board they're going to sit on next. They worry.
right,
That's why
right,
our friend Seth is such an anomaly too, right? They're like, well, you don't look and act like a Secretary of Defense. Well, what does that mean? Because the requirements are just an age and a citizenship, not that I've been on the board of Lockheed or General Dynamics for 20 years, right?
right. Well,
Can
look at
afford.
this Esper guy who was brought in by Mattis and Pompeo. Pompeo was West Point and was kind of the leader of that troika, I guess, to some degree from behind the scenes. Esper looked the part, right? Mr. Integrity and all that up there. And this guy turned on his president so absolutely and totally. It's unbelievable. I mean, you expect John Brennan at CIA to be the first CIA director to come out and basically backstab the commander in chief, who they serve totally. The military has a responsibility to the Constitution first, and CIA has responsibility to the president. Really, let's face it, they've broken the Constitution over and over and over again since they began. So they don't really have a big stake in the Constitution. If they try to claim it, they're lying. But you know, this we've seen all this. We've seen these terrible examples, and I hope Hegseth goes over there and just purges the hell out of the woke Pentagon. I'm going to err on the side of taking too many down. Frankly, sorry if he gets any good ones. That's terrible. But you know what? It's so bad over there. It's got to be a purge.
They've got a track record, and he was making his. And I want to talk about this the term limits board of governors. Sure. Get into that. But you know, what I was saying before during this campaign season, I did not. I'll be honest. I was first that said I didn't really want Trump to run again. I wanted him to be a kingmaker, not a king. I wanted him because they came after him so much the first time. I'm like, I want him behind the scenes, putting all the right people in place. Otherwise, he's just going to be a lightning rod. But once he got it, I was like, I would tell people over and over, he's not draining the swamp. He's burning it to the ground. And honest to God, that's what he's done over the last 7 weeks. I mean, from that, we were in that one arena on the 20th, and he sat there and started signing off those executive orders.
Yeah.
And that moment on, I mean, this is what burning the swamp down looks like, is exactly what they're doing. And
you know, you said something earlier that, of course, I agree with, and I wish for a restoration. We were talking maybe a little bit before this. I think we're in a reckoning. This is the way I look at it. We're in a reckoning, and this reckoning has to happen, and it has to be real tough and pretty bloody, frankly. And then we're going to be hopefully in a restoration. And in the restoration, there are things that we can do that are building things to make our country and our republic stronger. But during the reckoning, if we don't take out enough of the dead wood and the problem people and the problem elements like this USAD was, I mean, that's much worse than I ever thought it was. I knew it was bad, but I had no idea, you know, it's this bad. And so we're finding out all this stuff, and we have this one shot, because I don't think anybody's going to have the power of Donald Trump. I do want to say one thing from a perspective of faith, and then we go to whatever else, you know, if you want to talk about term limits, but God had a role in all of this, in my view. And in 2016, I think he had a role that Trump won, and Trump beat all those other people, because there were some good people that Trump beat to get there. Some pretty strong candidates, frankly, in 2016, unlike the situation we'd all been in before. And then in 24, maybe it was right that he lost in 20, because when he came back in 24, he came back with a head of steam, and God must have been somewhere behind a guy taking 8 shots. I mean, I shoot guns too. I'm no Marine sniper or anything. I did I did want to be a Marine officer, and didn't fall through on it. But you know, I mean, 8 shots like that from that place and that close, and Donald Trump turns his head to look at a chart up there about the problems on the border. I don't know, but if that's not God, I don't know who it is. You know, it's not a human thing.
I talk to people all the time. I was literally talking to someone today, right? There's Garth Brooks has a song, "Thank God for Unanswered Prayers," and sometimes we have things happen in life. I was just talking to one of my sons about this, and we think at the time it's the worst thing ever, and then you know, in hindsight, we look back and, well, if that incident hadn't happened and put me on a different path, I would not have accomplished what I got now. And I've been saying for the last few weeks that the best thing could have happened was, now in hindsight, was him to lose in 2020, because had he won, he would have continued on, and the Democrats would have continued on, and that deep state would have stayed. Him stepping back for 4 years, watching how it played out, watching them still attack him. They didn't let off, right? They threw everything, right?
Right.
from shooting at him to getting him thrown off of ballots to you name it, right? They were so worried about him running again. It's what they started with the 2 impeachments, and they went on from there. It allowed him to get back kind of the military, and you get your butt kicked on an objective. You retreat, regroup, reconsolidate, get your setup, and go back in and clean house and take the objective. That's what it did. And he's even said first time when he came in, he didn't know all these people were, right. He hired and fired a lot of people because he didn't know who they were. He did not understand how deep that the state was or how deep the swamp was. Thing could have happened was him to step back, get his senses, realize he needed to do it again, which he didn't have to do. If he would have said he never would have run again, they never would have done anything to him. And come back in, and he knows I got 2 years to midterms to get as much done. And if I get 2 more years after that, great. That's why he's doing it. This is the best thing could ever happen to the country. But in hindsight, right? At the time, we thought it was, but in hindsight,
that's why I have politics for me. I mean, being directly involved, I've always followed politics most of my life, but it's a humbling thing. I've there's some things I'm proud of that I did. I kind of drove Jeff Flake out of the race. If you remember Jeff Flake, he quit before he even got into the primary, and that was a lot to do with the activities of mine. Did some good things in Iowa, like I talked about, and there's some other races, but largely it's been humbling because not just because I lost, right, in my election, because there are these factors that come up, and the hand of the people's choice. The people do make actually pretty good choices when they are given enough information. The voters that choose to vote and take part, and God, the will of God. I hope. I think it was because it just went over most people's heads. So God, and so I will say on term limits, I had an evolution there that went from probably a more anti-term limits outlook, libertarian sort of thing, like, oh, and you hear this line many times because it is a good line, where people will say, yeah, we have term limits. It's called the election. Well, I wish that, like, I defended the monuments, okay, in the South, not because I'm a neo-Confederate or because I have a nostalgia for something, because it's history and because they are veterans and they were recognized as veterans. And sometimes those things were beautiful and they should be left for the future generations to understand what happened.
A lot of them were West Point graduates.
I mean, most of them, the big ones. And so but the point for me, I was going to say about that is that I understand what the concept of not term limiting is, but we know the founders believed that there shouldn't even be political parties. That might have been one of the things where the founders were a little bit naive or hopeful. I don't know what you want to call it, because there's not too many things I feel like criticizing the founders on when I look back on it. But we have found, let's just put it this way. You'll never get rid of some of the worst offenders that are on the other side unless there's term limits. So if you just look at it from that perspective, should it really be true that these poor people in some district, and I'm not a bleeding heart, and I don't go out of my way to favor one group over another because of their history or something, but why should people in the inner city of Baltimore have to have Elijah Cummings, before he died finally, be there forever? You can go down the list of people.
Maxine, Strom
Maxine,
Thurmond.
Yeah, Strom Thurmond too, for that matter. And nobody's irreplaceable. I used to think Jesse Helms was irreplaceable. He's my favorite senator, but he wasn't irreplaceable either. I believe we're in a time of disruption and it's necessary. I want to disrupt as much as I can. So I did accept to be Texas chairman after I lost my election, and did what I could there to try to influence people and work with other people I knew in politics. And a few months ago, the leadership at Term Limits asked me if I would come on the board. And my personal life, the reason I left Texas was my parents are down in Florida, and I'm an only child, and I need to be close to them. I love my parents, and I have a duty to my parents to be there. And there's no substitute for your presence, when sometimes in life and things. So I came here and I said, well, I'm doing a lot of things. I don't know if I can commit to it and be, do the job the right way. Once I believed that I could. I took it, and I'm going to work very hard for it because I really don't see another way to get. I think it's so important, frankly, that citizens get more involved.
Right.
I'm critical, like I said, of people. If you don't vote in the primary, in a Republican primary, I mean, you're really, frankly, not really voting. Okay, you're just floating on the currents of whatever somebody else decided. You need to get involved and get and educate yourself. Listen, this this phone this phone is something we have never had before in our life. It will take you 2 freaking minutes to figure out who your state rep is, who your state senator is, and you should know who your state rep and state senator is, frankly. The Constitution and the founders never said, oh, we don't want anybody to know anything about what's going on and just live in some libertarian fantasy world where there's no government or there's nothing going on. That's idiotic. They thought that the states were where we were going to protect our freedoms.
Right.
And if you don't know who your state people are, then you're busy and you have your kids and yeah, you do. And guess what? You have the other thing that you have to do, which is pick up this damn phone and take 2 minutes to figure out who these people are, because you're going to find probably wherever you are listening to this thing, if you don't do that already, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners probably already do all that. But if you don't do it, you're going to probably be surprised by who those people are. They may be the worst, terrible, most awful rhinos who you just keep electing and throwing back into office because you're not really paying much attention. You do
Well, look,
go vote,
I
you
mean,
know.
you live in the state of New York, right? I'm stuck with right for till probably he takes his last breath. I mean, he's not going to go anywhere. That's why I told people the reason why Hillary moved to New York to run is because the devil himself could come to New York as long as he puts a D after his name, he's going to win.
Yes.
And you know, so yeah, term limits would have kept Joe Biden from doing 47 years. It probably would have kept him from ever stepping in there. I mean, so let me just ask you on what are your thoughts of the ideal term, the ideal maximum term both a congressman and a senator should have? I'm just
Well, the
curious.
position of U.S. term limits is for 3 terms as a congressman and 2 terms as a senator. Um, and I think the idea with that was and I wasn't on the founder of the board of picking those numbers, but I believe that the idea was that ideally you would have a congressman going into becoming a senator. Some of them, I mean, there's only 100 senators, so you're not going to get every one of the former politicians to keep moving up the chain. And hopefully there would be a somewhat of a natural selection of the better ones. I think that the truth is, term limits USA and no political group exists in a vacuum. We have to make deals to get the best we can, and I'm very willing to do that. I've always driven very hard for anything I did. I don't just say, "Gee, I'm in here to give everything away," and let's all get along. I don't mind fighting, and I will do the very best I can to achieve the result. But in the final analysis, if we get term limits, federal term limits in this country, it is going to change politics. It's going to change the way lobbying's done. It's going to change the way the military, uh, industrial aspect, which is important. I'm not a hater of Raytheon. I'm not a hater of anything, right? But I don't want to be ruled by Raytheon or anybody that has a special interest. We don't want to have one special interest predominating and controlling the country. I'm not suggesting that it does, by the way, at this point, but I want things to be less that way than more that way. And you can't, if you don't replace these politicians, you Lindsey Graham, you got a lot of people complaining about Lindsey Graham. You go to South Carolina and they're correct. He is not somebody who should be having a 5th term. He's running for a 5th term this time. John McCain had 5 terms. What did we get when we got the 5th term of John McCain? He went up there and voted for socialized health care. And you know what? There's a lot of opinions about our health care. But if I go to emergency rooms quite often now with my parents. I'm learning things that I would never have learned over the last 3 years. Emergency rooms are worse than they ever were now. Obama claimed they were going to free us from poor people who only could go to the emergency room, and that was causing all that. Emergency rooms are worse than ever. It's ridiculous. So
Right.
John McCain did that for us. Mr. John McCain, 5th term John McCain,
Yeah. Right. Yeah. No, I mean, yeah, I tell people if you look today at whether it's the squad, the progressive squad on the left, or you look at what now is referred to as the MAGA Republicans. I mean, really, the Republican Party is kind of split in two from the established and the MAGAs. That's just a simple, quick glimpse of what it would be like, in my opinion, of what we had term limits. You would have younger people, middle age, whatever, but you wouldn't have these entrenched good old boy systems of people, making, what is it, $147,000 a year or something like that. I think I saw something the other day. I think, or
well, they complain about it. Don't you worry; it can't possibly be enough for their pearls of wisdom that you get.
Yeah. Year. AOC's only been there for a few years. She's 175. Thank you, Rob. And she's now worth like $5 or $6 million.
It's incredible. Yeah.
I don't like what parlaying, what Ponzi scheme, how do you turn 175,000 a year and before taxes and everything else and living costs into $5 or $6 million in just a few years. She was one that when she first came in was complaining about not being able to afford rent in DC because she hadn't got her first paycheck yet.
Right. Well, I will say this. They've made it so that they operate in gray areas that most of them do it legally by our lax, idiotic regulations when it comes to the politicians. But
their spouse do all the stock trades for them.
That's one of the tricks. They have so many ways that they have made it. They shouldn't even be trading shares. They shouldn't be trading stocks. Look, I've never made a penny off politics. I often say this to people in the final house. People, if I get into a heated argument with say an insider, they will often say, well, blah, blah, blah. I'll say, you know what? Here's the difference between you and me. I never made a penny. I lost money in politics, and I want to continue to do that because I can say that, and I can say certainly I will ban trading stocks or whatever inside Congress. Look at this Dan Crenshaw. This is a guy that veterans need to understand. I don't give a damn if I used to put Navy SEALs on a pedestal. Probably I would have voted for any Navy SEAL ever until I started to learn about some of them in particular and their globalist outlook and their their love of big government and all that. I mean, look, he is a terrible example. He's become a very rich man trading shares while being a congressman. That guy was living in his parents' basement. So I remember the first time he called me up looking for a donation. I mean, he was running against a super rich woman who everybody thought was going to win. And I talked to him. I tried to be nice to him. Then he told me, oh, I was an intern for Pete Sessions and how he loved the WEF and all this stuff. And I said, Dan, you're talking to the wrong guy here. That's not the way to my heart, So, I mean, it's going on, and it's a racket, and people should know that. And something Harry Truman, a good old Kansas City boy, had some flaws for sure, but he had a couple of things he said that's true, and one of them is you can't get rich in politics unless you are a crook.
Yep.
Whether it's legal, a gray area, or whatever, it's an abuse, and it is crooked, and that's another thing term limits would pretty much make impossible. Because I think we should tie in term limits with a lobbying ban of several years. So in other words, when you go out of the Senate, you can't lobby for some period of time. Even if you made it 4 years, that's enough for the influence to rub off them, and they wouldn't be worth as much as they are.
There's a reason why general officers are normally for 7 years from going into a position, unless they're waived and stuff, which is like Austin was. But it's rare, right. But it's to get attention. You just can't slip them in there and walk right out. But the term limits. So you're saying the policy is that's the group stands for is for 2 congressional terms or three
congressional terms of 2 years, and 2 Senate terms of 6 years each. Obviously.
Okay, so senators could serve possibly a maximum. Well, a congressman maximum
12 years.
6 years. A congressman can max 6. Yeah, and
senator.
Yeah. That's. I mean, you're in there long enough. You still got to campaign when your time comes up, but that's enough. And then you go back to your community, right? I don't get why elected representatives get lifetime health care. They could do 1 term, right? They could do 1 congressional 2-year term, and they have health care for life, right?
That's right. That's right. Among other things, by the way, they just tried to vote themselves a big raise.
Right.
And one of the amusing things is that the Democrats didn't manage to do that before they went out, and it's apparently caused an incredible amount of anger among them and rancor. And I'm sure some of the rhinos, uniparty people who are really wanted. And there was a couple things in there that were pretty bad. I can't. Some perks that they also threw into that besides the salary increase. And I think that's what killed it. Not so much the salary increase, but the perks that they had were particularly awful.
That should be put up for national ballot, like a local election will put up, some kind of bond approval, right? Raise your school taxes, do that
Right.
kind of stuff. I always said pay and benefits for Congress should be put on the national ballot for people to vote on, like a proposition, right? The American people can decide as a whole if
Yeah.
Congress as a whole, not one party or the other, deserves a raise or needs something. And based on the congressional approval polls, I think if anything, the American people would start taking money away.
Yeah, they might actually cut back.
How about we get you out of there? But yeah, it's well, that's interesting. So what is the a few minutes we got left? So what is the how is the board moving forward? I mean, what is it? Just a kind of a lobbying group? Are you pushing for it? Are you making progress with elected representatives to get them to support such a concept?
Yeah, I think we really are making progress. I mean, this has been a long-term thing that has met with significant challenges along the way, and not all people on the right agree with it. I greatly respect Phyllis Schlafly. She was simply outstanding in every way, and I hope she's going to get a Freedom Medal of Freedom for President Trump. She was not a fan of it, and so we have to fight first in our own world, right? To have the buy-in of people. The wide public is massively for it. Even Democrats. It's one of the few. It's bizarrely almost nonpartisan in regard to that, or bipartisan. I hate to use that word, but gosh, I would imagine the Democrats are becoming more pro term limits every day. The more they see of who they've elected, but the next step is you have to get basically it's the state legislatures and the state senates that approve this. So you're not,
state
yeah,
driven.
it is, and it should be, right? I mean, this is our system. I mean, this is the United States of America still, and states are sovereign. However, depleted state sovereignty has become over the years, we are a state sovereign society. And the states have to decide that. It is not left up to, thank God, to the congressmen. They would never do it. Okay, never. And the senators, they're not as bad on that as the congressmen, but they wouldn't do it either. So, and now you have to go into these legislatures, and this is what we do. Let me give you an example in Texas. I haven't been a board member very long, so I think in a way they're going to expect me to be dealing with more insiders, I guess, on a larger scale. But I went to state senators, I went to state reps in Texas, and I explained to them, look, this is why I support it, and tried to sway them to be firm that they would vote for it once we could get a resolution, and it's even a non-binding resolution, right, which puts a sort of letter of intent out there for a commitment to getting it done. And it's hard work because you've got to go through the entire state legislature of Texas, which is a lot of folks in a big state, and then get the state senate, which is smaller and more manageable to caucus with and lobby essentially. And I wasn't able during that time. I guess I did it in Texas about 3 years, roughly about 3 years. Well, maybe a little less than that, but I wasn't able to put together enough to enact it like it is in Missouri, for example. Missouri is a very good state for this and a good example. But of course, even now I'm working on that first because I know the Texas people and I know what's going on in Texas, which is, by the way, very interesting. If people are interested in studying Texas politics, I urge them to do it because Texas is the cornerstone electoral state. We were talking about the Electoral College a little bit. If the Republicans do not have a firm Texas, we're done. It's over. I don't care what happens because The Democrats solidly have California and solidly have New York, as you well know, and we would be in instantly in trouble. So that's another reason to get term limits, in my view. By the way, because Texas has never been as red as the legend would have you believe,
Right,
and
right. Oh, it's
so.
big. Out of Austin is grown beyond just Austin for sure. Uh, San Antonio, Houston, yeah. There's a lot of dots there, but I mean, so could a state? I mean, do all the states have to agree an amendment, or could a state enact term limits for its elected representatives, congressmen, and senators just for
You
a
have
state?
to have a percentage of states, a certain number, and then that would constitute the essentially uh, changing it for the federal government. And it's a two-part thing where the states have to also convene potentially to make sure that that the spirit of it. I mean, look, you wouldn't want to have term limits in which the term limit was so bad, so many years. Let's just say that U.S. term limits can't get 3 terms for Congress, right? If we got 5, would that be still pretty good? It would be 10 years. Well, it'd be better than 30 years, which we've seen with a lot of these people. And so, that you have to think about that logically and what would be done. But what if they said, yeah, okay, we'll do that. But in the Senate, you'll have, uh, you'll have, 5 terms. And so you would say, then you have another way to have a 30-year politician, and an even more important or powerful. You can't let that happen.
Right.
So, because in bargaining on these things, it's not as if the other side who is opposed to limited government, which is a generalization, but the people who are collectivists, the people who like big government, and they're not just going to say, "Oh gosh, the people want it, it's time to do it," ha ha ha, let's get it done. They're always going to be fighting back in various ways. So it is I don't want to make anyone think that I am under the delusion that it's easy, but nothing is easy that is really impactful and important. Nothing.
No.
So
You gotta,
it enjoys widespread support. That's where I'll start with that, and we'll try to get the other parts together.
what drastic thing's going to have to happen to get people to change their mind? For the American people either to rise up and say this has to happen and make their voice
Well, I
heard.
think it's more or less that the people have to rise up and make it happen. If you don't know who your state rep is, if you don't know who your state senator is, well, how the hell are you going to do anything about that? I mean, you see, that's the thing. If the people take back their interest and their proprietorship of their states, and that's the old all politics is local thing being actually very true. If they take back ownership of those states, then listen, those politicians have a very hard time playing games and not pursuing their will. In Texas right now, there's a fight of the group, a faction of Rhino Republicans who have gone together with the Democrats to take control of the speakership, which basically controls the state ledge. And these people don't care what their people think. But that's because the people that elected them don't even know
Yeah.
that they're not who they say they are.
It always starts local. That I tell people
Yeah.
it's so worked up at the national election on 2020 with rules being changed the night before and everything like that. It starts at your school board, then it
Yes.
starts at your town board, your
Yes.
senate, your county. Work your way. It really people think that doesn't matter. That's where it all starts, right? That's
Well, it's a lot harder, in my view, in my book. It is much more difficult to be an elected state rep or an elected state senator, but even going down to be a school board member. Those are where the rubber meets the road. You have to deal with people who really do care and really are angry at you if they disagree with you. So you're in confrontational situation these days, pretty hardcore. And unfortunately, I think one of the things in our society, in American society, look, isn't it great that we do put a premium on trying to be nice? Isn't that a great thing? Kansas City was kind of a capital of nice in a way. So I don't mean to say that I don't appreciate that, and I really do. Americans are incredibly generous. They give money all over the world. They give money to people in their communities. I mean, they don't have to be believers in God either. They're secular people that are wonderful Americans who believe in their community and helping people. But we can be too generous and too nice. These
Yeah.
damn politicians need to be held accountable first. They might take a selfie with you and be nice to you and whatever, but if they're not doing what they told you they're going to do, then that's
Right.
called lying to you. And you have to confront them with the fact that you understand that. And then you need to vote against them and replace them, or you need to run. That's the other thing. It's not like great candidates for state legislature grow on trees.
Right.
If people don't get into it, the Democrats have an advantage because their people love politics. They love to be, recognized and be the head of the game and whatever, be the state rep and all that. Our people are much less that way. They are much more humble and much less driven to be in positions of authority or power in that way. And so we don't necessarily have a huge group of candidates. That was my biggest problem in Texas,
Yeah.
finding people to run. I ran for office, for federal office, because I couldn't find anybody to run who I thought was a really conservative. It wasn't even if they were the greatest candidate. I've supported people that were not the strongest candidates because they were very conservative, and I hope they could improve and do better, right, and build them up and all that. And that's sometimes true and sometimes not. I want to see a world where we have good people getting involved.
Right.
Just please get involved with your country.
Yep. No, it is. Like I say, it starts down there, and like you said, it's harder being a state or even a local town board or school board because if those people are mad with you, you're gonna see them in the grocery store line, right? You're gonna see
That's
them.
right.
Your
That's
account,
reality.
right? When you're up at the federal level, it's back there that'll answer your calls, and you ribbon cutting, and then you're out, and you don't have to face those people. And like I say, if they don't know who their elected reps are in Washington and they're not reaching out to them, enough of them, they don't hear from you. You're not impacting their everyday up there, right? They're not. If you don't, and when you go to DC, I tell people all the time, we've tried to do it with us. If you go to DC, go visit their office, get a chance, go in the RAS building.
You can walk right through there, all those buildings, and go in there and knock on the door and see if they're there. And the good ones will come out and meet you if they're there. In my view, the good ones. I mean, not everybody is as much a people person as another person, right? I mean, sometimes we have guys that are personable and they get away with a lot because of that. That's something to look out for in life too. I mean, just because the guy's the best salesman doesn't mean he's giving you a great deal.
Right.
But the point is, you can get much more involved than you. I'm talking to a general person here. I don't, talking to the audience and saying, if you haven't really thought about it, and many haven't, because we don't have a society where, thank God, we're totally involved in politics in the past as much as we've recently become. I mean, look, you can get as involved as you want to get involved. You have a right to be involved. And you don't need to be circumspect or especially humble about that. I mean, we all want to have some politeness and civility because otherwise we can't do anything without that. But when the push comes to shove, if you want to say, "Look, I know you voted on this, and you just said you didn't," you're lying. That's called lying. You're not telling the truth, and that needs to be called out. And yeah, you're a nice guy and everything, but so what?
Right.
I mean, it's time to call a spade a spade.
Right. You campaign this. I got your flyer. You would support this or not support that, and that you did it. Like,
yeah,
right, just the face-to-face interaction. Be like, some people don't like that uncomfortableness, and you can still do it tactfully and with civility, and be like, you said you wouldn't do this, but you did. What changed your mind? Right. I mean, it may change my mind. Why should I support? Because I still don't. Right. That kind of stuff. And the people, then they may know maybe they won't, maybe they'll blow you off. But if you don't do anything, like you talked about, you don't vote in the primary, right? Or like you tell some people, if you don't vote at all, that you don't have an opinion, right? You don't get to.
No, if you don't vote at all, you're really just blown in the wind. But I mean, we may go back and say, look, in 1980 up to about then, Reagan, Carter, you could maybe somehow have said, well, the change between Reagan and Carter, they couldn't contemplate that he would take away a lot of the FDR stuff. That was what they used to say, that our society had changed, and we can't do this, or we can't do that. There's nobody in 2024 who was saying, "Oh, I don't want to change anything. I'm worried that we're going to upset the apple cart that we've had." Look, we are disrupting all over the place because we have to actually. If we want
Yeah.
to stay a strong country and independent, we have to assert our control of this government in our states and in our federal government. Period.
Yeah.
If you
Absolutely.
don't use your power, use your citizenship and your power now, or you really will lose it.
Well, someone that has fought in many countries and defended people with disability, right? We've always said, the ability to go out and vote and have free elections is a gift that we have in this country. But another gift is that you can go speak up, right? We have the Bill of Rights. We have the can go speak up. You can go confront your elected representative. We're not a monarchy. We're not anything like that. And you have the ability to your voice counts. Right. And we'll have to have you back on again and talk about electoral college and stuff, because that's kind of where it gets into me with, I want your vote to count. Right. I want people to look, say, I'm that one of the 321 million, blah, blah, blah. Like, that's me and my vote. And we see that again in downstate and down ballot elections. We see that, a 54 vote difference made a call. Wow. Only 50. That's my street. Like,
Well, that's true. Oh, that is true.
you
I mean,
know,
those percentages don't add up to what the exact votes are. A lot of times, people just look at percentages. They should look at the total votes. They'd be
right.
shocked. I
We
feel
talked,
it.
right. People worried about 1,000 vote difference. They're worried about 100. Right. So,
Right.
yeah. So anyways, hey, Chris, we've been on a long time, hour and a half, almost, coming up on that. Dude, thank you so much. This was, I told you it was going to be free flow, but we make time go by quick.
Well, I love talking politics. So my wife is thrilled that I was here with you for an hour and
Not feeling
a
hurt. She's like, oh, goodness.
half.
No, that's good. Hey, let's definitely stay in touch, my friend. Would
Yes,
love to
sir.
back on. You have a lot of experience and much smarter than this than I am. And
I just learned the hard way. I got kicked around.
yeah, it sounds like it. But well, hey, good. Thank you so much for coming on. Thank you so much for all the people tuned in tonight to see the numbers, listening and watching. And go check it out. Rob's been putting the URL up there, and Chris, I think you said it, man. Stay involved, get involved, and make your voice heard, huh? So with that, check it out, termlimits.com. And everybody have a good night. Thank you so much again. Thank you, Chris, for giving us some.
Thank you, sir.
Everyone have a good night. Rob, on you.